The morning air in the garden district smelled like magnolia and marble. Even the light, golden and quiet, seemed curated, as if the street had been designed not just for the wealthy, but for the appearance of peace. Malcolm Rousseau watched it from behind a wall of glass, sipping black coffee he didn't taste. The windows stretched from floor to ceiling, offering a perfect view of trimmed hedges, iron gates, and the kind of old southern architecture that tourists paid to photograph. But to Malcolm, it looked like a movie set he couldn't walk off. His mansion was silent, too silent. No footsteps, no laughter, no music. Just the soft ticking of an antique clock somewhere down the hall and the hum of air conditioning. He didn't mind it. He preferred it. Silence didn't betray you. Silence didn't leave. His phone buzzed. "Calendar cleared today," George's text read. "Your Forbes interview's been moved to Friday. Board still pushing for a photo op. Let me know." He typed nothing back. Malcolm had built Rousseau Labs from a laptop in a rental apartment with peeling wallpaper. Now it was worth $118 million and climbing. An AI-based mental health platform that claimed to help people find clarity in chaos. The irony was so thick, it made him smile sometimes. Just not today. He poured more coffee. Still didn't drink it. At 41, Malcolm had everything they said you were supposed to want. Money. A team that called him visionary. Real estate in 2 countries. And a name that had become a brand. But there was a hollowness that wealth never filled. Not even close. He wandered into his mother's old music room. He kept it untouched. Dustless, but frozen in time. Her cello leaned against the corner, bows still strung with her last rosin. She'd played Vivaldi every Sunday morning, right before making lemon pancakes. Malcolm hadn't eaten pancakes in 19 years. He sat down at the edge of the piano bench, ran a finger over the polished wood, then stopped. The memory was too sharp. Behind him, the intercom beeped. "Mr. Rousseau," George's voice came through gently. "Your car's ready. Do you want me to ride with you?" "No," he said, clearing his throat. "I'll drive myself." He heard the hesitation on her end. She didn't question him, though. She never did. That was part of her brilliance. Moments later, Malcolm stood in the driveway beside a glossy black SUV. The driver had called in sick, or maybe quit. He couldn't remember. He didn't ask. He climbed in, turned the key, and backed out slowly, one hand on the wheel, the other adjusting his sunglasses. It was barely 10 a.m., and already the sun was high. The streets of New Orleans buzzed with tourists, early jazz, and the uneven rhythm of city life. But none of it touched him, not in this car, not behind these tinted windows. He wasn't sure why he was heading toward the Bywater. He told Georgia he wanted to see how the community partnerships were doing on the east side, some soft PR play about social impact. But that wasn't the truth. The truth was, he didn't know, only that something felt off, restless, like a string pulled tight inside him for too long. He parked near Frenchman Street, where the artists were just setting up their booths. The sidewalk glittered with beads, chalk, and broken dreams. He stepped out, inhaled, and looked around. Nobody recognized him here. Nobody cared. That anonymity felt dangerous and good. He started walking. A jazz saxophonist played a slow, aching tune at the corner. A woman with silver braids and no shoes danced like the sidewalk belonged to her. Life felt real here, unfiltered. It scraped instead of smoothed. Hey, ma'am, you good?" The voice snapped him back. A small crowd was forming near an alley. He moved closer, trying not to intrude. At the center of it stood a woman, tall, brown-skinned, wrapped in a second-hand coat, despite the heat. Her hair was tied back with a red scarf that looked handmade. She stood facing 3 loud tourists, young, sunburned, clearly drunk. She wasn't yelling. She didn't need to. Her eyes alone could slice through a man's pride. "I said I'm fine," she repeated calmly. "Please let me through." One of the tourists laughed. "We're just talking. No need to get dramatic." Malcolm saw it then. Not danger, just the slow erosion of someone's boundaries, right there on the street, under a crowd of half-curious eyes. The woman didn't flinch, but Malcolm did. Something twisted in his gut. People were pulling out their phones, recording. She glanced sideways, saw the lenses, the attention, the silent observers doing nothing. A flicker of defeat crossed her face, just for a second. And without thinking, Malcolm stepped forward. He didn't plan it. There was no calculation, no strategy. Just an instinct that had nothing to do with logic. He walked up beside her, slid an arm gently around her shoulders, and looked the tourists in the eye. "She's my wife," he said. The words were soft but clear. The street went still. Even the music stopped. The woman beside him didn't say a word. She didn't look at him, but she didn't pull away either. She stood taller. Someone in the crowd whispered, "Wait, is that Malcolm Rousseau?" Phones clicked. Someone gasped. The tourists muttered apologies and backed off, confused and embarrassed. "Let's go," Malcolm said quietly. He guided her across the street, through the dazed onlookers, and around the corner. When they stopped, she finally looked at him. Her eyes were sharp, unreadable. "Who the hell are you?" she asked, voice low. "I'm sorry," he said, stepping back. "I saw what was happening. I didn't mean to overstep." She raised an eyebrow. "You just told a street full of people I'm your wife." He gave a small, rueful smile. It worked. She stared at him for a long beat. Then, out of nowhere, she laughed. Just once, soft and almost broken. "I should be furious," she said. "You should. But for what it's worth," she glanced at the fading crowd, "you probably saved me from a lot more trouble." He nodded, unsure what to say next. "What's your name?" she asked. "Malcolm." "Of course it is." She paused. "I'm Celeste." Another silence. "Well, Malcolm," she said, stepping back. "Thanks for the rescue, but let's not make a habit of it." And with that, she turned and walked away, disappearing down the sidewalk like she owned it again. Malcolm watched her go. He didn't know her story. But something in her voice, her stance, the way she refused to look small, it stayed with him. He had meetings to get back to, calls, emails, a business to run. Instead, he leaned against a lamppost, pulled out his phone, and refreshed his notifications. His screen lit up. Breaking. Tech CEO Malcolm Rousseau seen kissing mystery woman in New Orleans. She is my wife. The headline sat there, bold and irreversible. Malcolm exhaled through his nose. This was going to be complicated. If you enjoyed this video, comment 1 to let me know. If not, comment 2. Your thought mattered to me either way. Malcolm didn't sleep that night. The headline wouldn't let him. She is my wife? It was on every blog, gossip site, and tech news scroll by the time the sun dipped behind the oaks of the Garden District. His phone wouldn't stop. Mentions, tags, even reporters calling his office line directly. Georgia sent him a flurry of texts, ending with, "You need to get ahead of this. Call me." He didn't. Not yet. Instead, he stood by the floor-to-ceiling window in his bedroom, arms crossed, phone buzzing on the nightstand behind him. Outside, the sky was bruised purple. The city pulsed with jazz and secrets. He watched the light from the street lamps scatter across the hood of a parked car and tried to make sense of what happened. A stranger. A moment. A kiss that wasn't a kiss, just a gesture, fast and clean, protective. But still, a kiss. And now, this. He hadn't seen it coming. Not the crowd, not the viral video, and certainly not the way the woman, Celeste, had lingered in his mind long after she vanished around that corner. Her voice, her control, the way she looked him in the eye, like she didn't care who he was. No one had looked at him like that in years. He turned from the window, ran a hand through his hair, and checked his phone. 42 missed calls, 87 texts. One name caught his attention, Vivian Alcott, of course. He opened her message. "So, this is interesting. Wife, do call me before this becomes a branding issue." For you, of course. He tossed the phone onto the bed, its buzz muffled against the linen. In the kitchen, he poured himself a glass of cold water and stared at the marble countertop like it might hold answers. He could feel it beginning, that slow drag of the narrative slipping out of his hands. It wasn't the scandal that bothered him. He could survive scandal. What unsettled him was how little control he had over that single sentence. She is my wife. Why had he said it? Why did it feel right? Across town, in a dim room above a small cafe that let her sweep the floors in exchange for storage space and shelter, Celeste Dupree sat on a folded blanket, staring at her cracked phone screen. A friend had shown her the clip earlier. She watched it once, then again, and again. Every time, it was the same. Her shoulders squared, his voice calm, the crowd quiet. And that sentence, "She is my wife." She pressed pause and tossed the phone aside. "Wife," she muttered under her breath, then let out a laugh so dry it barely sounded human. "Girl, you really do know how to attract the strange ones." The room smelled like dust and lemon cleaning spray. Her bag was tucked under her knees, her journal beside her. The lights flickered once before settling into a steady hum. She wasn't angry. Not exactly. She'd seen worse, survived worse. But still, the feeling of being exposed, again, made her skin itch. "I'm not a victim," she whispered, more to herself than anyone, but it felt like the world was trying to make her one. Outside, the clatter of delivery trucks and muffled music from Frenchman Street echoed against the old brick walls. This city never really slept, just changed tempo. Her phone buzzed again. Unknown number. She stared at it, let it buzz until it stopped. Then it rang again. This time, she answered. A pause. Then a familiar voice. "Celeste?" She blinked. "How did you get my number?" Malcolm's voice was quieter than she remembered, less controlled. "I had Georgia trace the call from the cafe earlier. I needed to talk to you. May I?" She should have hung up, should have cursed him out, should have told him never to call again. Instead, she said, "You have 2 minutes." A soft exhale on the other end. "I didn't mean for this to happen. The video, the media, any of it." "I know," she said flatly. I saw what was happening, and I reacted." "You mean you pretended I was your wife to avoid a confrontation?" Another pause. "I wanted to protect you." "Why?" It came out sharper than she intended. He hesitated, then, "Because no one else was going to." That silenced her. For a beat, neither spoke, just breathing, just quiet. "I want to make it right," he said finally. "You can't, but I can help clean it up." She let out a breath, pinched the bridge of her nose. "I don't need cleaning up, Malcolm. I'm not a story to spin." "I know that." "Do you?" He didn't answer. "I'm not interested in being part of a PR rescue," she continued. "You made a scene. You played hero. I played along. We're even." "It's not about even," he said. "Then what is it about?" Another silence. "I don't know yet." That made her pause. He sounded honest. Exhausted maybe, worn down by more than just the day. She looked over at her journal. The cover was bent, pages filled with verses she hadn't had the courage to read aloud in months. "You really don't know what you started," she said finally. "I think I'm starting to. I lost everything once because someone tried to play hero and then disappeared. Don't do that to me again." "I won't." The firmness in his voice surprised her. She stood and walked toward the window. The neon light from a nearby bar painted stripes across her face. "What do you want from me, Malcolm?" He didn't answer right away. Then softly, "Dinner." She blinked. "Excuse me?" "Dinner. One conversation. No cameras. No plans. Just talk. Let me apologize in person." "Are you serious?" "I am." She could hear her heartbeat in her ears. "No one would believe it's just dinner." "I don't care." She laughed again, this time with a little sadness tucked into it. "You're lucky I'm too tired to yell at you." "I'll take that as a maybe." She exhaled. 1 hour. Neutral place. Somewhere public. No photographers. I know the perfect spot. Don't make me regret it. I won't. They hung up. She stood there, hand still on the phone, heart suddenly louder than the street noise outside. This wasn't supposed to be happening. This wasn't supposed to feel like the beginning of something, and yet it did. The cafe Malcolm chose was tucked between two galleries on a quiet stretch of Magazine Street, far enough from the French Quarter to avoid tourists, but local enough to feel authentic. No cameras, no PR traps. No curated ambiance trying too hard to impress, just the low hum of jazz spilling softly from a vintage radio, a counter stacked with mismatched mugs, and a waitress named Ruby, who didn't even flinch when Malcolm Rousseau walked in. Celeste was already seated by the window when he arrived. She wore the same scarf, red, hand-knotted at the side, but her coat was different, lighter, pale denim. Her journal sat beside her cup of tea, closed but present, like a shield. She didn't stand when he entered, didn't wave, just looked up, saw him, and returned to her tea. He hesitated for a second at the door, then walked over and sat down across from her. "You're late," she said without looking up. 3 minutes, he replied. "You're lucky I waited. You're lucky I showed." That earned him a sideways glance. "I could have ignored your call," she said, voice quiet. "But you didn't." She finally looked at him, eyes sharper than he remembered. Tired, maybe, but alert. Like someone who'd stopped expecting kindness and learned to study people instead. "You're not what I expected," she said. Malcolm blinked. "What did you expect?" "A suit, a pitch, maybe even a lawyer." "I left them at home." A beat passed. Then she gave a slow, reluctant smile. "Smart man." The waitress appeared, poured Malcolm a cup of coffee without asking what he wanted. She must have known his order. Celeste watched that, her expression unreadable. "So," he said, finally breaking the silence. "Thank you for coming." "I almost didn't." "I would have understood." Celeste stirred her tea. "You said you didn't mean for the video to go viral. I believe that. I appreciate it. But I don't think you realize what that moment did to me." Malcolm set his cup down. His hands were steady. His voice wasn't. "I've spent my whole career controlling everything," he said. "My schedule, my image, my silence. That day, that moment. It just broke through all of it." She didn't interrupt. "I saw you," he continued, "not just in trouble. I saw someone who didn't flinch, even when people were being careless with your dignity, that kind of strength. It stopped me. I acted without thinking." Celeste tapped her spoon lightly against the rim of her cup. "I've had people say worse things to me in public," she said. That wasn't new. But what was new? Having a stranger step in. Not because he wanted something, not because he felt superior, but because, for whatever reason, he couldn't watch it happen. Their eyes met and held. Then she leaned back, folding her arms. "But here's the thing," she said. "When a man like you does something impulsive, the world calls it bold, heroic, even. When a woman like me shows up in the same story, I get dissected." Malcolm swallowed hard. "I know." "No, you don't know. You don't know what it's like to have your name passed around in group chats and Reddit threads. You don't know what it's like to be called everything but your name." She looked out the window, voice low now. "I've been invisible for so long, and now I'm visible in the worst way. I didn't mean to, but you did. And the truth is, I don't hate you for it." Malcolm looked up sharply. "I should," she added, "but I don't." The jazz track faded into something slower, something sadder. "Do you want to know what I was doing before you walked into that alley?" she asked. "I do. I was going to throw out an old set of poetry flyers, ones I made when I first started my nonprofit. I used to run a small arts center, for kids, mostly girls. Help them write their stories, paint murals, build something out of nothing. What happened? A man I trusted forged my signature on some funding paperwork, cleaned out the grant money, left me to take the fall. Malcolm's jaw tightened. They called it negligence, then fraud. By the time the investigation ended, I'd lost the building, the donors, and my name. He was quiet. And the hardest part, she continued, eyes flickering back to him, wasn't losing the job. It was losing the girls who used to call me Miss C. They stopped coming. Their parents stopped calling. The silence hurt more than the scandal. "I'm sorry," he said, sincerely. She nodded once. "Yeah, I am too." They sat in the quiet for a moment. Then Celeste leaned forward. "So tell me, Malcolm, why are you alone?" He blinked. "What makes you think I am?" "Because men like you don't eat alone in cafes unless they're trying to feel something again." His lips parted, but nothing came out. "I saw it," she said, "in the way you stood there before stepping in, like something cracked, like you weren't sure what to do with yourself." He looked down, then back at her. "I haven't been in a real relationship since my mother died." "How long ago?" "Almost 20 years. That's a long time to shut the door." "I never shut it," he said. "I just built a house around it." Celeste's expression softened. "I think I've been doing the same," she admitted. "Except my house doesn't have walls, just corners, places I hide." Their eyes met again, but this time there was something warmer beneath it, something almost dangerous. A pause stretched between them. Finally, Celeste said, "You do realize this dinner didn't fix anything, right?" "I know. And I'm not your cause. I'm not your redemption arc." "You're not my anything," he said. "But I'd like the chance to get to know you without cameras, without viral clips. Just you." She tilted her head, studying him. "Why?" "Because the moment I kissed you, fake or not, I saw more truth in your eyes than I've seen in any boardroom in years." She didn't respond right away. Then she stood, grabbed her journal, and slid it into her coat. "One dinner," she said, "no promises. And if you ever use the word wife in public again without my permission—" "I won't," he cut in quickly. She smiled faintly. "Smart man." As she walked out, she paused at the door. "You were right," she said without turning around. "About what?" "I do flinch. I've just gotten good at hiding it." Then she left, leaving Malcolm at the table with a half-drunk cup of coffee, a heart that beat a little louder, and a silence that, for the first time, felt strangely alive. If you enjoyed this video, comment 1 to let me know. If not, comment 2. Your thought mattered to me either way. The video didn't die down. If anything, it was catching fire. By Thursday morning, Celeste's face was everywhere, on YouTube reaction channels, on Twitter threads dissecting her body language, on morning shows that blurred her image and still managed to reduce her to the mystery woman in red. They didn't know her name yet, but they would. Malcolm knew it the moment his phone buzzed at 7:13 a.m. Georgia's voice came through crisp, controlled, and thinly veiled with panic. "We've got a problem." He didn't even ask, just sat up in bed, exhaled slowly, and rubbed his temple. "Go ahead." "An influencer account just posted your wife's real name, Celeste Dupree. A couple of Google sleuths tied her to an old non-profit scandal." He froze. Georgia continued, "It's spreading fast. Your board is already pinging me. I've muted half your press channels, but they're requesting a formal statement from you. By noon." Malcolm stood up, pacing now. "Tell them I'll draft something by 10. "You want PR to handle it?" "No." She paused. "Malcolm." "No," he repeated more firmly. "This isn't a product launch. I'll write it." Georgia hesitated again, then lowered her voice. "I Googled her too." He turned toward the window, watching the iron balcony cast long shadows across the floor. "I didn't ask you to." "I know, but I needed to understand what we were getting into." "We're not getting into anything." "Then why haven't you walked away?" He didn't answer. She softened, barely. You're a smart man, Malcolm, but you know how this works. People don't care about the truth. They care about optics. They'll eat this woman alive. And if you don't distance yourself, you'll go down with her. His voice came out low. Then let them try. Click. He ended the call and stood still, the quiet humming louder than anything else. The storm had arrived. He wasn't ready, but he was done hiding from it. On the other side of the city, Celeste sat in the back hallway of the cafe where she cleaned before opening hours. Her hands smelled faintly of lemon soap, and her fingers were damp from wiping tables. Her phone buzzed again. 10 unread messages, 3 missed calls. The last notification stopped her cold. Vivian Alcott started following you. Her chest tightened. She remembered that name too well. Malcolm's ex. The perfectly sculpted one. The one who used to host benefit galas with her hair in a bun and her words dipped in syrup and shade. She clicked the name. Vivian's latest post was a selfie, captioned, "Funny how some people build legacies while others go viral for being convenient." The bile rose in Celeste's throat before she could stop it. She stood, shoved her phone into her coat pocket, and walked outside for air. The morning was thick with humidity, the sun already too bold. She crossed her arms, staring out at the street like it had betrayed her. A voice broke the quiet. "You always walk that fast when you're mad, or is today special?" She turned sharply. Malcolm. He was leaning against a lamppost like he hadn't just set the internet on fire. Button-down shirt, sleeves rolled, no tie, calm, controlled. But his eyes, those gave him away. They were tired, human. "You shouldn't be here," she said, barely keeping her voice steady. "Probably not. You've seen what they're saying." "I have." "And?" He stepped closer. "They'll say worse." She blinked, stunned. "You're not trying to defend me." "I'm not here to defend you, Celeste. I'm here to tell you I don't care." That hit harder than she expected. She folded her arms tighter. "You should care. Your reputation is worth more than my whole existence." "Don't say that. It's true." "No," he said firmly. "It's what they want you to believe." Silence stretched between them, heavy and thick. Then she laughed once. Bitter. "You think showing up here makes this noble? You think this makes us even?" "No." "Then what do you want?" He exhaled slowly, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "I want you to see something." She hesitated before taking it. As she unfolded it, her hands trembled. It was a copy of a letter, dated from 3 years ago. A recommendation, signed by donors. Names she hadn't seen since before it all fell apart. "I tracked them down," he said quietly. "They wrote this when the allegations against you hit, but no one published it. No one wanted your side. I had to dig." She stared at the words like they were written in another language. Her name, followed by words like visionary, dedicated, wrongfully accused. Her throat tightened. "No one's ever done that for me," she whispered. "I know." She looked up at him. "What now?" she asked. He met her eyes. "Now we get ahead of the story. Together." She blinked. "You want me to go public with you? As what? Your wife?" "No," he said. "As the woman I respect. The one I kissed, not because I had to, but because I didn't want the world to treat her like she didn't matter." She didn't speak, couldn't. The tears came without warning, silent, stubborn. She turned away, wiping her face with the edge of her sleeve. "I'm not built for this kind of spotlight," she said. "I've been surviving in shadows for too long." He stepped closer. "Then let's stand somewhere in the middle. Not in the light, not in the dark. Just where people can see you, as you are." Her shoulders trembled. She let out a shaky breath. "Okay," she whispered. He nodded. "Okay." Then gently, almost imperceptibly, he reached out and took her hand. Not in a show, not for a photo, not for the press. Just because he wanted to remind her that she was still real, still here, and still worth holding on to. By the time Celeste stepped into Malcolm's car, she felt like she'd crossed into a different world. The interior smelled like cedar and leather. The silence between them was thick, not awkward, but filled with everything unsaid. They weren't strangers anymore, but they weren't safe either. Not from the headlines, not from each other. Malcolm didn't drive fast. He turned corners like each one held a secret. She sat in the passenger seat, hands tucked into her lap, eyes watching the city blur past in golds and greens. He didn't ask if she was okay. She didn't offer it. Finally, she broke the silence. "You still haven't told me where we're going." He glanced at her. "Somewhere quiet." "That's not an answer." He smiled softly. "You'll like it." She looked out the window again. "You sound too confident for someone who just lit my life on fire." Malcolm gripped the wheel tighter. "That's fair." Another beat passed. "Do you regret it?" she asked. He didn't answer right away. The hum of the road filled the space between them. "I don't regret meeting you," he said finally. "I regret that I didn't think before I acted, and that I put a spotlight on you when all you wanted was a little peace." She nodded once, slowly. Peace is a luxury most people don't notice until it's gone. He turned onto a narrow road lined with trees, canopies of moss filtering the sunlight like stained glass. She sat up straighter. "This is City Park," she murmured. He nodded. "I come here when I need to think." They pulled into a small parking lot beside a sculpture garden. No reporters, no cameras, just the sound of wind brushing leaves and water lapping in the distance. Celeste stepped out slowly, stretching her arms, breathing in the stillness. "You brought me to a park," she said, glancing over her shoulder. "I brought you to a place where the noise stops." He led her down a gravel path toward a bench nestled between two trees. The air smelled like earth and cypress. They sat in silence for a moment, the calm folding around them like a blanket. Then Malcolm spoke, his voice low. "Can I tell you something I've never said out loud?" She looked at him, curious but cautious. "That depends. Is it a confession or a flex?" He chuckled. "Neither." "All right then, go on." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "When my mother died, I stopped talking to people." Her breath caught. She didn't move. "I mean really talking. I went through the motions, business meetings, investor calls, small talk. But I didn't let anyone inside, not one person. For 19 years, I built this empire, I guess, but it wasn't a life. It was armor." Celeste watched him carefully. "And now?" "Now," he said, voice quieter. "I can't get your voice out of my head." She turned away, staring at the reflection of trees in the water. "You know this can't be some storybook fix," she said. "You're not going to kiss me and undo everything that's been done." "I don't want to fix you," he replied. "I want to know you." She closed her eyes for a moment. The breeze tugged at the ends of her scarf. "There's a girl I used to mentor. Her name's Tonya. Brilliant. Wrote slam poems at 15 that made grown men cry." He listened without interrupting. "She's the only one who kept in touch after everything collapsed, but she stopped answering my calls 2 weeks ago. And when I went by her place last week, her sister said she dropped out of school. No one knows where she is." Malcolm's brow furrowed. "I failed her," Celeste whispered. "I was her anchor, and when my name got dragged, so did hers. She's gone now, and I don't know if she's safe." Her voice cracked, and she looked away fast, blinking hard. "I've been pretending I'm okay with that, but I'm not." Malcolm reached into his coat pocket and handed her a folded napkin. She took it wordlessly and dabbed at the corners of her eyes. "You didn't fail her," he said softly. "Yes, I did. I promised her the world, and I barely had my own footing. You did the best you could. And what if that's not enough?" He leaned back, eyes on the water. "It rarely is, but sometimes showing up anyway is the bravest thing." She looked at him then, really looked. He wasn't polished in that moment, not the tech mogul in the glossy press releases. Just a man with tired eyes and calluses in all the places he didn't show. You talk like someone who's made peace with their ghosts, she said. I haven't, he replied, but I'm done letting them drive. She smiled faintly, the corners of her lips trembling. Is this how you win people over? She asked. Parks and confessions? Just you. They sat there a while longer. The sun filtered through branches, casting patterns over their skin. For a second, the world outside didn't exist. No headlines, no rumors. Just the sound of water and two people trying to breathe the same air. Eventually, Celeste stood. We should go. He nodded and rose beside her. As they walked back to the car, she stopped suddenly. You said you don't regret meeting me. He turned to her, hands in his pockets. I meant it. Then don't let me fall and disappear. Not like everyone else. His jaw tightened. I won't. Promise me. He stepped closer. I promise. Her eyes searched his for any hint of a lie. She found none. As they got into the car, neither of them noticed the pair of eyes watching from across the street. Hidden in plain sight, leaning against a brick wall, phone in hand. The camera shutter clicked, once, then again. The quiet was ending, and neither of them saw it coming. Malcolm hadn't planned to check his phone. Not after the stillness of City Park. Not after holding Celeste's hand beneath those cypress trees where the world had finally stopped spinning. But as he dropped her off outside the cafe and watched her walk toward the side entrance with her journal clutched to her chest like a secret, the first buzz made his stomach sink. Then the second came, and the third. He pulled into a side lot, turned off the engine, and opened his notifications. Trending. Had Malcolm and Celeste photos leaked. Rousseau's wife seen in intimate park outing. Video. Anonymous source captures tech billionaire and mystery woman in secluded NOLA location. The images were grainy but unmistakable. Celeste laughing, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. Malcolm's hand resting near hers on the bench. Another angle showed them walking side by side, close, her scarf fluttering like a flag in the breeze. He closed his eyes. It hadn't even been 2 hours. The privacy they'd built, what little of it existed, had already shattered. His phone rang again. Georgia. This time he picked up. Don't say it, he said. I have to. Malcolm, this is spiraling. Who leaked it? We're working on it. Might be paparazzi. Might be someone from her cafe. She doesn't even know yet, he muttered. You need to get ahead of this, and fast. How bad is it? She's being labeled everything from a social climber to a scam artist. The non-profit scandal's back in rotation. News blogs are spinning timelines saying you've been secretly seeing her for months. He pressed the heel of his hand against his forehead. Tell the board I'll issue a statement. You mean we'll issue a statement? No. This one's mine. Georgia exhaled on the other end. You're walking into fire, Malcolm. I started it. He hung up and stared through the windshield, jaw clenched. The city didn't care about nuance, not now. It wanted a headline, a villain, a neatly packaged moral. But Celeste wasn't a villain, and she sure as hell wasn't a footnote. He threw the car into drive. She needed to know before someone else told her. Jacka. Celeste was shelving mugs behind the counter when she heard the bell above the cafe door. She glanced up, expecting Ruby or a delivery guy. Not Malcolm. He looked out of place under the soft yellow lighting, dressed in that same shirt, but with the weight of the internet on his shoulders now. You're back early, she said carefully. His face was unreadable. We need to talk. Her stomach dropped. What happened? He pulled out his phone, slid it across the counter. The photos filled the screen. She stared, breath catching in her throat. No words, just images. Intimate, quiet, stolen, and now viral. Someone followed us, she whispered. He nodded once. She scrolled down. The hashtags, the threads, the assumptions, the cruelty. I thought we were careful, she said. We were. But it wasn't enough. No, he said quietly. She stepped back from the counter, suddenly feeling too exposed, like the cafe windows had turned into spotlights. "Do you know what they're saying about me?" "I do. And do you care?" He looked her straight in the eye. "Yes, but not the way you think." She crossed her arms. "You shouldn't be here. This place, this life, it's not part of your world." "I know. Then why are you pushing your way in?" "Because I refuse to let them tell our story." Her laugh was bitter. "Our story? Malcolm, this was never an us. It was a kiss in an alley, a dinner in the dark, and a moment in a park that wasn't supposed to be anything more." He didn't flinch. "And yet here we are." She stared at him, anger and fear colliding behind her eyes. "I've spent years trying to piece myself back together. And now, because of one decision, you've cracked everything open again." His voice was calm but tight. "You're right, and I won't ask you to forgive me, but I will ask you something else." She looked at him warily. "Let's tell the truth, together." She blinked. He continued. "Let's release a joint statement. Let them see the real you, the real me. Let's talk about what happened, why I stepped in, and what we're doing next. Not because we owe them, but because silence is letting them rewrite everything." Celeste turned, walked toward the small back room, and leaned against the doorframe. She could hear the espresso machine steaming behind her, feel the judgment of strangers already forming like clouds on the horizon. "I'm not sure I can survive another scandal," she said quietly. "I won't let it become one." She glanced back at him, her voice barely above a whisper. "You say that, like you can control it." "I can't," he admitted, "but I can stand next to you when it happens." Her breath hitched. "What if standing next to me costs you everything?" He stepped closer. "Then at least I'll know what I stood for." Silence stretched between them again, thick and trembling. Then a soft voice broke the air. "Well, I'll be damned." They turned. Mrs. Eloise stood in the doorway, apron tied at her waist, eyes narrowed in disbelief. She looked at Celeste, then at Malcolm. "I go to prep cinnamon rolls for 20 minutes, and y'all make national headlines." Celeste's eyes widened. "Mrs. Eloise." The older woman raised a hand. "I've seen worse," she said calmly. "I've been worse. But baby, if you think hiding's gonna fix this, you've already lost." Celeste swallowed hard. Mrs. Eloise stepped closer, her tone gentler now. "You don't need fixing, baby. You just needed someone who wouldn't flinch when you told the truth." Malcolm looked at Celeste. "So let's tell it." She held his gaze, heart pounding. Then, slowly, she nodded. "All right, but on one condition." "Name it." "We don't lie. Not to them, not to each other." His reply came instantly. "Deal." And just like that, the quiet between them turned into something else entirely. A beginning neither of them could have written, but one they were willing, finally, to claim. And the press conference was scheduled for Thursday morning at 10. Malcolm insisted on hosting it at the community center downtown, not some glitzy hotel ballroom with velvet ropes and publicists flanking the walls, but a space with worn tile floors, local art hung crooked on the walls, and folding chairs that creaked when people sat. "Let the setting speak," he told Georgia. "We're not staging a defense. We're telling the truth." Celeste stood in the hallway outside the main room, staring at her reflection in a dusty window. Her curls were pinned back just enough to keep them out of her eyes. Her scarf, no longer red, but a deep plum, was wrapped around her shoulders like armor. She didn't feel brave. She felt like she was about to walk barefoot across glass. Malcolm appeared beside her, adjusting the cuffs of his shirt. His jacket was tailored, but not flashy, understated, clean. He looked every bit the billionaire the world thought they knew, except his eyes gave him away again, soft, careful, watching her more than the cameras. "You ready?" he asked. "No," she said honestly. "Me neither." They shared a breath. Then, quietly, Celeste added, "But I'm tired of hiding." He offered his arm. She took it. The double doors opened, and suddenly they were in it. There weren't many reporters, just a few local outlets, a couple of curious community bloggers, and one woman from a mid-tier national news site who probably got the assignment as a throwaway. But they were enough. Malcolm stepped up to the podium first. Celeste stood to his right, hands clasped in front of her. Her heart pounded so loud she barely heard his opening lines. "Thank you for coming," he said. "You already know my name. What you don't know, what no one outside this room knows yet, is the real story behind that video." He paused. "Celeste Dupree is not my wife. We are not married, but I would be lying if I said the moment you saw was staged. It wasn't. It was instinct. It was connection. It was real." Whispers, pens scratching against notepads. He continued, "In a world addicted to spectacle, we forget that sometimes what happens between two people, two strangers even, can be more than gossip fodder. It can be a turning point." He turned slightly toward Celeste, and she met his gaze with trembling breath. "This woman has been through more than most of you will ever know, and she stood in that alley with her head held high, long before I stepped in. That moment didn't make her brave. She already was." He stepped back. No grand flourish, no spin, just space. It was her turn. Celeste moved toward the microphone like it might shatter if she touched it wrong. Her voice shook at first. "My name is Celeste Dupree. I'm not a mistress. I'm not a headline. I'm not a viral sensation. I'm a woman who made mistakes, who trusted the wrong people, who tried to build something for others and ended up watching it fall apart beneath her feet." She exhaled. "I ran a non-profit for 7 years. We worked with young women, girls who had nothing, no voice, no visibility. I taught them to write, to stand, to speak." She paused. "And when my name got dragged, so did theirs. That's what haunts me. Not the accusations, not the silence, but the feeling that I failed them." Malcolm was watching her, every muscle in his body still. Celeste continued, "I didn't plan to be rescued. That kiss in the alley wasn't some Cinderella moment. It was a man seeing a woman as a human being. And if that bothers people, if it doesn't fit into a tidy box, I'm not sorry." The room was completely silent. Then, without warning, she added something that wasn't in the notes. "Her name is Tonya." Malcolm's eyes widened slightly. "She was one of my students. Brilliant, loud, unapologetically full of fire. I don't know where she is now, but if she's watching this, I want her to know, you were never invisible to me, and I'm still here." The final words sat in the air like a held breath. Then, slowly, a hand in the back of the room clapped. Then another. Then the room broke into soft applause. Not loud, not performative, just real. Like exhaling after holding something too heavy for too long. They left out the side door. No reporters followed. No photographers waited. Just the hum of a city already moving on to its next scandal. Malcolm and Celeste walked to his car without speaking. He opened the door for her, then slid into the driver's seat. When he didn't start the engine right away, she turned to him. "You didn't have to do that," she said softly. "I know. But you did. I couldn't let them write your story without your voice in it." She leaned back in the seat, the exhaustion finally crashing down. "I feel like I've been holding my breath for a year," she said. "And now?" She smiled faintly. "Now I want pancakes." He blinked. She laughed. "What? I haven't eaten, and I'm still wearing my nerves like armor." He grinned. "I know a place." She looked at him. "Malcolm, this doesn't fix everything." "No," he said, "but it's a beginning." They drove without music, the kind of quiet that didn't feel heavy but earned, like they had walked through fire and came out not unburned, but still standing. And for the first time in a long, long while, Celeste wasn't running. She was choosing. The diner Malcolm brought her to was tucked between a laundromat and a pawn shop on Elysian Fields. It didn't look like much from the outside. Faded green awning, a neon sign that buzzed more than it glowed. But the second Celeste stepped inside, she understood. It smelled like cinnamon and coffee grounds. Booths were worn soft with time, and the walls were plastered with handwritten notes from regulars, thank yous, prayers, inside jokes scrawled in Sharpie. An older woman behind the counter caught sight of Malcolm and lit up like he was her favorite son. "Well, look what the cat dragged in. Haven't seen you since you cancelled on my peach cobbler." Malcolm raised a hand. "My deepest regrets, Mrs. Alma." She came around the counter and pulled him into a brief hug before giving Celeste a once-over, measured but not unkind. "And who's this lovely thing?" "This," Malcolm said, glancing at Celeste with a softness in his voice she wasn't ready for, "is Celeste." Mrs. Alma nodded. "Well, you picked a good one. You can always tell by how folks sit. She stands like she's been waiting for a table in her own life for too long." Celeste blinked, startled. "That's surprisingly accurate." Mrs. Alma winked. "Baby, I serve more than breakfast in this place." They sat near the back, in a booth by the window where the sun poured in like honey across the tabletop. Malcolm slid into his side without hesitation. Celeste hesitated before settling across from him. He didn't dive into conversation. He let the silence settle first, like he knew she needed to find her footing again. Finally, she spoke. "You didn't flinch today." "No. Even when they were throwing looks like daggers. I saw them. You didn't blink." He leaned forward, resting his arms on the table. "Celeste, I've spent most of my life building walls, not for protection, but to keep people impressed. That's a very lonely kind of applause. You made me want to be someone different." She stared at him, and for a moment her heartbeat filled the space between them. "You barely know me, don't I? You know pieces, my past, the scandal, my name. You saw me kiss you once in an alley and speak from a podium." "That's not knowing." He didn't argue, just waited. "I sleep with the lights on most nights," she said, her voice low. "Not because I'm scared of the dark, but because quiet makes the memories louder." Malcolm's brow tightened. "I keep receipts for things I didn't even buy. I double-check locks. I rehearse conversations before I have them. Every friendship I've had in the last 5 years has ended with a door I didn't know I left open." She looked down, fingers tightening around her glass of water. "I'm not simple, and I'm not whole." He reached across the table slowly, carefully, and placed his hand over hers. "Good," he said, "because I'm tired of pretending I am." She looked up at him, something fragile flickering in her eyes. Before she could speak, the bell over the door jingled and Georgia walked in. Celeste stiffened. Georgia spotted them immediately and made her way over, clipboard tucked under one arm, tablet under the other. Always prepared, always polished. "I tried calling," she said to Malcolm, barely glancing at Celeste. "I turned my phone off," he replied. "Well, of course you did. Why be reachable in a digital age?" She gave him a tight smile, then turned her attention at last to Celeste. "You look composed." Celeste offered a cool nod. "Thanks. You look scheduled." Malcolm coughed to cover a laugh. Georgia placed a folder on the table. "I'm here because we need to plan next steps. There's a speaking opportunity next week at the Chamber of Commerce. You both could appear. Joint message, further control the narrative." Celeste raised a brow. "Further control?" Georgia blinked, her tone flattening. "Yes, that's what this is. Strategy. Public redemption is theater, Celeste. It doesn't matter how authentic the feelings are. If the lighting's bad and the lines fall flat, people change the channel." Malcolm cut in, his voice low. "Georgia." "No, she's right," Celeste said, eyes locked on Georgia's. "I just haven't decided if I want to be a performer in my own life again." Georgia studied her. "You know, I used to think you were just a story Malcolm got swept into, but now I'm starting to think You're the one writing it. Celeste leaned back. Takes one to know one. Georgia smirked, collecting her folder. I'll give you two some privacy, but the world won't. Just remember that. She walked out without waiting for a goodbye. Silence fell again, heavier this time. She's not wrong, Malcolm said after a beat. No, Celeste replied, but that doesn't make her right. She stood, suddenly needing air. I need a minute. Outside, the air was humid and clinging. She leaned against the brick wall, eyes closed, letting the sun warm her face. The diner door creaked behind her a moment later. Malcolm didn't say anything, just stood beside her. After a long pause, she whispered, "Why does she hate me?" "She doesn't," he said. "She hates losing control. I'm not trying to take anything from you. I know, but I think you already have." He turned to her, expression unreadable. "You make me choose. Every day. Between comfort and truth. Between safe and real. And which are you choosing today?" His answer was quiet. "You." A pause. Then she whispered, almost too soft to hear, "Don't stop." He reached for her hand again, threading his fingers through hers. "I won't." And in that moment, beneath the buzz of neon lights and the smell of fried dough and coffee beans, two people not meant for fairy tales began to believe in something even rarer, a story they could write without pretending. Celeste stood in front of the chalkboard in the back room of the cafe, her hands dusted in white, heart pounding louder than the soft hum of conversation drifting in from the front. She hadn't stood in front of a class in over a year, not since the scandal. Not since her world unraveled, and she locked every part of herself behind silence and shame. But today, they came. 6 young women sat in mismatched folding chairs, some chewing gum, one sketching quietly in a notebook, another with her arms crossed so tight it looked like she was trying to hold herself together. They weren't here for her name. Most barely knew it. They were here because Mrs. Eloise asked them to come, and when she asked, people usually listened. Celeste cleared her throat. "You don't know me," she started, eyes darting across the room. "And honestly, that might be for the best. But I used to run a program just like this one. We met in basements and coffee shops and borrowed classrooms. We wrote, we read our stories out loud. We told the truth, even when it scared us." One of the girls, Ray, Celeste remembered, tilted her head. "What happened to it?" Celeste didn't flinch. "I lost it. But I didn't lose the reason I started." Ray's lips curved just a little. "Today," Celeste said, "you're going to write something you've never told anyone. You won't have to share it. But I want you to feel what it's like to let it out." There was silence for a beat. Then pens started moving. Celeste exhaled. She was back. Hank. After the workshop, she stepped out into the alley behind the cafe for air. The sun was starting to dip, throwing streaks of gold across the graffiti-tagged brick walls. She leaned against the edge of the building and let herself breathe. That's when she saw Malcolm. He was waiting, leaning against his car, hands in his pockets, eyes already on her, like he'd known exactly when she'd walk out. "You were spying," she said with a half-smile. "I was observing," he replied, with emotional investment. She laughed. It surprised her. It felt good. He stepped closer. "You looked at home in there. I forgot how much I missed it," she said, her voice quieter now. "For a minute, I thought I'd never get to teach again, like the one thing I was built to do was gone." "It's not gone," Malcolm said. "It just needed a new door." She looked at him, the air between them shifting again. There was something different in his eyes tonight, less guarded, more open. "I have something for you," he said suddenly, reaching into his coat. Her breath caught. He pulled out a small folded stack of papers. "I asked my team to find Tanya." Celeste froze. "She's in Baton Rouge." Enrolled in a GED program. She's working part-time at a bookstore. Quiet life, but safe. I didn't contact her, but I thought you'd want to know. Her hands trembled as she took the papers. Why would you do this? She asked, voice cracking. He didn't hesitate. Because you mattered to her, and she still matters to you. She clutched the paper to her chest. Her eyes shimmered but didn't spill over. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. Celeste looked at him like he was made of something breakable. No one's ever fought for the pieces of me before. They always wanted the part that smiled on stage or wrote the perfect speech. But not this part. The messy part. Malcolm took a step closer, his voice barely above a whisper. It's the messy parts that make you unforgettable. Their silence swelled with something unspeakable, tenderness edged with fear. And just when she felt her heart tip forward, the door to the cafe creaked open behind them. Mrs. Eloise poked her head out. Malcolm, baby, I hope you ain't planning to steal my girl for the evening without eating. I got gumbo in the back. He raised his hands in surrender. Wouldn't dream of it. Celeste gave her a grateful smile as the door closed again. She thinks we're something, Celeste said softly. Malcolm looked at her. Aren't we? She hesitated. I don't know what this is, she admitted. I don't know what I'm ready for. I'm not asking you for answers, he said. Just don't run, not yet. She looked at the folded papers in her hand, then at the man standing in front of her like he wasn't afraid of her storms. I'm still learning how to trust the ground, she said. I'll stand on it with you, he whispered, even when it shakes. She reached for his hand, held it for a moment longer than necessary, and in that quiet alley, beneath a sky bruised with the promise of night, something shifted again. Not an ending, not a beginning, but something real, something worth staying for. The cafe smelled like fresh vanilla and sweet cream. Celeste stood behind the counter early that morning, watching the light pour through the windows like a quiet blessing. The regulars were slowly drifting in, Mrs. May with her crossword puzzle, Roy with his black coffee and need to complain about the humidity. But her hands were trembling. Today wasn't just another shift. Today she would visit the foundation board of the non-profit that had once been her life, not as a pariah, not as a ghost, but as Celeste Dupree, teacher, survivor, woman who refused to disappear. You don't have to go alone, Malcolm had said the night before. But she had told him, gently, this part is mine. Mrs. Eloise came in from the back with a fresh tray of scones and took one look at her and said, You're wearing your brave face. Celeste offered a half smile. It's the only one that fits today. Eloise set down the tray and wiped her hands on her apron. Just remember, you're not walking into that room to beg. You're walking in to remind them who lit the fire in the first place. I know. They didn't build that program. You did. Celeste met her eyes. They still hold the key. Eloise tapped her chest. Then knock until they remember who they gave it to. The board meeting was held in a brick building uptown, all glass walls and brushed metal. Polished, expensive, sterile. Celeste walked in alone. No camera flashes, no press, just the receptionist looking at her like she was a file someone forgot to close. When she stepped into the conference room, every face turned. 12 people sat around a long, sleek table. Familiar, too familiar. Karen Rowley, vice chair, hair curled and lips tight, the same way she'd looked the day she'd voted Celeste out. Ronald Peck, the donor with the checkbook that dictated entire curriculum decisions. And Marcia Halpern, the woman who once told Celeste she was too emotional to lead. Celeste greeted them with a nod. No smile, no apology. Thank you for agreeing to meet. Karen cleared her throat. This is irregular, Celeste. You no longer hold a position with the foundation. I'm aware, Celeste said, calmly pulling a single folder from her bag. But you do, and that means you have a responsibility to hear me out. A pause. Ronald tapped his pen. This about your public rebranding? No, this is about the girls. Celeste opened the folder. Inside were letters, handwritten, typed, printed on crumpled paper. This is from the young women who were part of the original program. Many of them reached out after the press conference. They asked if the workshops were ever coming back. They said the silence made them feel like they were the scandal. Karen glanced down, hesitated. These girls don't care about your board's reputation, Celeste continued. They care that no one checked on them. They care that their stories were locked away while you tried to erase mine. Marcia folded her hands. Even if we wanted to revisit the program, your name is complicated. Celeste leaned in, voice steady. You can't pretend to empower young women while erasing the ones who built the foundation. And you think Malcolm Rousseau's support makes you untouchable now? Ronald asked. I think, she said, voice sharp now, that his support reminded people I exist. But I came here alone for a reason. I don't need a man's shadow to make my own light. Silence rippled through the room. I'm not asking for a position, she added. I'm asking for access. Let me mentor again. Run a pilot series. You don't even have to use my name. Karen finally looked up. Why come back? Celeste swallowed, then said quietly, because I built something I was proud of. And just because the world tried to burn it down doesn't mean I'm done planting seeds. The room stayed silent for a beat too long. Then Marcia sighed, rubbing her temples. Let us discuss. We'll get back to you in a few days. Celeste gathered her folder, gave one final look around the table. Just remember, she said softly, while you decide whether to let me back in, those girls out there are already watching the door. Outside, she sat on the steps of the building and let the wind move through her like breath. Her phone buzzed, a message from Malcolm. How'd it go? She stared at it, then typed, I didn't break. That's all that matters. Before she could press send, another text came through. Meet me at the spot. City Park. The same bench, the same trees. But the air felt different now, like it had shifted to make space for something softer. Celeste saw him before he saw her. Malcolm was standing under the tree, looking up like he was searching for answers in the leaves. She approached slowly. Did you think I wouldn't show? She asked. He turned, a smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. No, I just wanted to be the one waiting for once. She sat beside him. You were right, she said. That place still stings. But I didn't flinch. You were always brave, he said. Now they see it. Celeste looked out at the water, then down at her hands. I keep thinking this will start to feel normal, but nothing about this is. That's what makes it real. She turned to him and her voice dropped low. I'm not ready for forever. I don't even know what tomorrow looks like. I'm not asking for forever, he said. I'm asking for tonight, for truth, for whatever this is, raw, messy, honest. Celeste blinked, tears threatening but not falling. Then sit with me, just like this, until the light changes. So he did, and they stayed there, two hearts not healed, but healing, side by side, quietly choosing each other again. The sun had barely risen when Celeste's phone rang. She was already up, standing at the kitchen window, coffee untouched. A heaviness sat on her chest, like something was shifting underneath her skin, like she knew change was coming before it knocked. The name on the screen made her breath hitch. Karen Rowley. Celeste answered, slow and cautious. Hello? Karen's voice was tight, composed. Celeste, the board voted this morning. Silence filled the gap between them. We're reinstating the mentorship program, Karen continued. Under a new name, new structure. You'll oversee the pilot, effective immediately. Celeste blinked. You're trusting me with it? No, Karen said. We're trusting the women who asked for you." Celeste didn't speak for a long beat. "There are still people watching," Karen added. "This doesn't erase anything, but it starts something." Celeste exhaled. "That's enough." Later that morning, she stood in front of the mirror, adjusting a pin on her jacket, hands steady for the first time in weeks. A soft knock came at the door. She opened it to find Malcolm standing there, holding 2 coffees and a small paper bag. "I figured you'd need fuel," he said. She smiled. "You're early. I wanted to be the first to say it." "Say what?" He stepped in close. "Congratulations, Director Dupree." She raised an eyebrow. "You heard already?" "Georgia keeps me updated, against her will." Celeste laughed, really laughed, and let herself lean into his warmth. "You look good when you laugh," he murmured. "You say that like I don't usually." "I say that like I missed it." She softened. "Thank you for believing in me." "You did the work," he said. "I just stood out of your way." "You stood beside me," she corrected. And for a moment, the silence between them felt sacred. But just as quickly as the warmth bloomed, something shifted in his gaze. "I need to tell you something," he said quietly. Her smile faltered. "What is it?" Malcolm stepped back slightly, the coffee cup trembling just enough that she noticed. "The reason Georgia's been pushing for these press opportunities. There's a deal. A merger." Celeste froze. "A merger?" He nodded. Russo Investments is about to acquire a media company, a massive one. The board's concerned that the attention around us, this story, it could complicate things. Her voice was careful now. "So what are you saying?" "I'm saying they want me to take a step back. From public involvement. From you." Celeste stared at him. "Are you stepping back?" Malcolm looked down. "I don't know." "That's not good enough." His silence said everything. She folded her arms, pain creeping into her chest, like ice in her lungs. "So when it was just my name on the line, you stood beside me. But now that it's yours—" "No," he cut in quickly. "That's not fair. What's not fair is pretending this isn't exactly what I feared. That when things got real, you'd choose the easier road. I'm not choosing anything yet. But you're thinking about it." His jaw clenched. "I've spent my entire life building something I never cared about until you showed up and made me question what it was for. Now everything's on fire, and I'm trying to figure out how to save both of us." "I didn't ask you to save me." "I know," he said, "but I wanted to." Celeste looked away, her voice dropping. "I can't be your secret, Malcolm." "You're not. If you pull back now, if you fade out when it matters most, that's exactly what I'll become." His throat worked around words he didn't seem ready to say. She stepped back, wrapping her arms around herself. "Maybe I needed to see this, to be reminded." "Of what?" "That love and loyalty don't always walk hand in hand." The silence stretched. He took a step forward, but she held up a hand. "Please, I have to go." Malcolm's mouth opened, then closed. She slipped past him, down the stairs, not looking back. And for the first time in their story, they walked away in separate directions. Not because the feeling had faded, but because the weight of reality had finally arrived. It rained for 3 days. Not the kind of rain that passed through like a whisper, but the kind that settled deep in the bones of the city. Steady, unrelenting, gray. Celeste moved through it like someone learning to breathe underwater. She kept working. She showed up to the mentoring sessions, sat with the girls who still hadn't found the courage to read their stories aloud. She sent grant proposals, returned emails, stayed busy. But every moment felt like it was missing something, someone. Malcolm hadn't called, not once, and she hadn't reached out either. Pride? Maybe. But deeper than that was fear. Fear that calling him would confirm what she already suspected, that the distance wasn't just strategy, it was choice. She hadn't known what it would feel like to be left without anger, without betrayal, just uncertainty. On the 4th day, Mrs. Eloise found her standing behind the cafe, soaked through, staring at the mural on the wall like it might give her answers. "You waiting for it to repaint itself?" the older woman asked, holding out a towel. Celeste took it but didn't move. "I didn't think I'd fall for him," she said softly. "And when I did, I didn't think I'd have to fall alone." Eloise sighed and stepped beside her. "Let me tell you something about love, baby. It's not always loud when it leaves. Sometimes it just stops knocking." Celeste looked over. "You think he's gone for good?" "I think people make choices, and those choices tell you who they are when no one's watching." She nodded slowly. Then Eloise tilted her head. "But I also think people who walk away in silence don't always do it because they don't care. Sometimes they're just waiting to see if the door opens again." Celeste let that hang in the air. "I don't know if I have it in me to open it." "Then don't," Eloise said gently. "Just leave the porch light on." The next evening, the Mentorship Center held its first public reading night. Celeste arrived early to set up, arranging chairs, testing the microphone, straightening papers even when they didn't need straightening. The walls were strung with fairy lights. A table in the back held lemonade and cookies. She told herself it didn't matter who showed up. But when the room started to fill, young women, older neighbors, community volunteers, her chest swelled with something she hadn't felt in a long time: belonging. She stood near the back as the first girl stepped to the mic. Ray, nervous, shoulders squared. "My story," Ray began, "isn't about what happened to me. It's about what I decided it wouldn't define." Celeste watched her, heart in her throat. The room was silent, hanging on every word. One after another, the girls read their truths. Stumbles, tears, laughter. And with each voice, the room grew warmer, braver. When the final reader sat down, Celeste stepped forward. She hadn't planned to speak. But her hands moved to the mic before she could stop herself. "I used to think shame lived in silence," she said, voice steady. "That if I kept quiet long enough, eventually the world would forget who I was. And maybe I would too." She paused. "But I was wrong. Silence doesn't make the pain go away. It just makes it grow roots." She scanned the room. Faces young and old, eyes wide and soft. "This," she gestured around, "this is how we pull the roots out. Together." Applause, not polite, but real. The kind that wraps around you. She stepped back, heart full, eyes brimming. And then she saw him, Malcolm, standing near the back, half in shadow, his face unreadable. Her breath caught. She didn't move. He didn't either. Not until the room emptied and she was alone with the folding chairs and the leftover cookies. He stepped forward. "I didn't want to ruin your night," he said. "You didn't." He looked at her, a storm in his eyes. "I made the deal." "Signed the papers." She nodded slowly. "I'm stepping down from the board," he added. "Not because they asked, because I realized something." She waited. "I built a kingdom to prove I mattered, and then I met you. And for the first time, I mattered without it." Her lips parted. "But I hesitated. I stepped back when I should have stood still, and I can't undo that. But I'm here, if the door's still open." Silence stretched long and tender between them. Then her voice, soft but sure. "You were never outside the door, Malcolm. You were just afraid to knock." He took one cautious step closer. "Can I come in now?" Celeste didn't smile. She walked forward, reached for his hand, and held it like she was sure. "Yes," she said. "But this time, you stay." The night after the reading, New Orleans felt quieter than usual. Celeste and Malcolm walked side by side down Esplanade, the canopy of oaks above them lit with a soft amber glow from the street lamps. Their steps were unhurried, words sparse, but the silence wasn't heavy. It was healing. It held the space between what was said and what didn't need saying. "I almost didn't come," Malcolm said at last. She glanced at him. "I know. I stood on the sidewalk for 15 minutes, telling myself you didn't need me there, that maybe I'd missed my chance to matter." Celeste didn't answer right away. The truth hung there, raw and fragile. "You did miss the moment," she said, voice calm, "but you didn't miss the meaning." He looked over, eyes open, exposed. "I didn't come back tonight to fix anything," he said. "I came back because watching you from the shadows made me realize I'd rather stand in the fire than live untouched." She stopped walking. "Say that again." He turned to face her, closer now, under the soft golden streetlight. "I'd rather stand in the fire than live untouched." Her eyes searched his. "I'm not going to ask you to promise me anything, Malcolm. I've lived enough of my life on broken promises. I'm not offering promises," he said. "I'm offering presence." A beat passed. Then Celeste reached up, gently resting her hand on his chest. "Then be here," she whispered. "Not as a hero, just as you." The following week, things moved forward in quiet momentum. The mentorship center buzzed with new energy. Applications poured in, volunteers reached out, and donors started calling again, not out of pity, but curiosity. Celeste stood in the office late one afternoon, reviewing a list of grant requests, when a knock tapped at the open door. She looked up. Georgia. "I come bearing news," the assistant said, walking in with a tight smile. Celeste braced herself. "Good or bad?" "Depends. The Rousseau board wants to offer you a public partnership. They're planning a campaign featuring community projects Malcolm supports." Celeste's brows lifted. "They want me to stand beside him again?" Georgia shrugged. "They think it's poetic. Redemption arc. Public love story with a philanthropic twist." Celeste crossed her arms. "And Malcolm? He didn't push for it, but he didn't block it either." Georgia paused, then softened. "For what it's worth, I think he's trying to walk a fine line. Too fine, maybe. But I've worked for him a long time. I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you." Celeste let out a long breath. "That doesn't make it easier." "No, but it makes it real." Georgia turned to leave, then added over her shoulder, "Don't let them script your story. They don't deserve to." That night, she found Malcolm sitting alone at the Riverwalk, wind tugging gently at his sleeves, the city lights dancing across the water. "You should have told me about the campaign," she said as she approached. He looked up, no surprise in his eyes. "I was going to. I just didn't want to pressure you." "You're not. But you should have asked." He nodded. "You're right." Celeste sat beside him. "I don't want to be part of a narrative," she said. "Not for the press, not for the board. I want to be part of something that's mine." "I understand." She glanced at him, searching his face. "I need to know something, Malcolm. If this, us, isn't in the spotlight, if there's no redemption story, no media glow, do you still want it?" He didn't look away. "Without a doubt." Her breath shook with the relief of it. "Then let's do this our way," she said. Quietly, honestly. "No performances. No masks," he agreed. Celeste nodded, eyes warm. "Then come with me tomorrow," she said. "There's a community meeting about expanding the program into the 9th Ward. It won't be fancy. Just a circle of metal chairs and people with big hearts and bigger stories." "I'll be there," she smiled, small but certain. "You might be the only man in the room. Then I'll sit and listen." Celeste leaned her head on his shoulder. And for the first time, the future didn't look like a headline. It looked like a life. The church basement smelled like lemon oil and old stories. Celeste stood at the back, watching folding chairs fill with women from all corners of the 9th Ward. Mothers with tired eyes, teenagers with notebooks clutched like armor, grandmothers who'd seen too much and forgotten nothing. It was a space where truth didn't have to be polished. She glanced to her right. Malcolm stood near the coffee table, pouring paper cups, letting the women speak around him. He didn't try to lead, didn't try to prove. He blended in quietly, with a kind of reverence. That was what struck her most. He hadn't come to perform. He'd come to listen. The hum of voices faded as Mrs. Delphine, the community liaison, tapped her hand on the metal lectern. "All right, y'all, let's settle in." Chairs squeaked, bodies shifted. Delphine nodded towards Celeste. "She don't need much introduction, but for those who don't know, this is Ms. Celeste Dupree. She's been through the fire and came back with seeds." A ripple of warm laughter passed through the room. Celeste smiled. "Step forward." "I'm not here to sell you a program," she began. "I'm here because I believe stories can build bridges. And I believe some of the strongest bridges in this city start right here." She paused, letting the silence stretch, anchoring the room. "A year ago, I lost everything I thought gave me worth. And I thought, maybe I didn't deserve to stand in spaces like this anymore. But a young woman, just 17, looked me in the eye one day and said, 'Ms. Celeste, even if they shut the door, you better kick the wall.'" The room chuckled softly, but the emotion caught in her throat. "She reminded me who I was." Celeste gestured to the women around her. "That's what I want to build here. A space where no one forgets who they are." Applause came, not loud, but deep, a kind of agreement. After the meeting, a slow trickle of women stayed behind, asking questions, offering stories. One by one, they handed her their names, their contact info, their willingness, and in the quiet of that room, a new branch of the mentorship program began. Outside, the sky hung low with lavender dusk. Celeste and Malcolm walked toward the lot, footsteps echoing on the cracked pavement. "That was powerful," he said softly. "I forgot how good it feels," she murmured, "to not have to prove myself, to just be." He glanced sideways. "You didn't just be, you lit something." She stopped walking. "Why are you really doing this, Malcolm?" He blinked. "Doing what?" "All of it. The community meetings, the quiet appearances, the letting go of power. You didn't build your empire to sit on folding chairs in a church basement." He looked at her, expression unreadable. "You ever walk through a house you once loved and realize all the furniture is too expensive to sit on?" She nodded, slowly. "That's what my life started to feel like. Expensive. Impressive, but untouched." He stepped closer. "Then I kissed a woman in the middle of the street because I couldn't watch her shrink for someone else's comfort, and for the first time in a decade, I felt like something in my life wasn't hollow." Celeste swallowed hard. "That night," she whispered, "you didn't even know me." "I didn't have to," he said. "I knew the weight you were carrying. I saw it in your shoulders, and I knew that if I didn't act, I'd hate myself for walking past someone brave enough to stand still when the world told her to run." Silence filled the space between them. Then she said, barely above her breath, "I don't want to lose this." "You won't. I mean it, Malcolm. I'm not strong enough to do this and wonder if you'll vanish again." "I won't. But if you do," she continued, voice cracking just slightly, "I won't break this time. I'll just keep building without you." He took her hands gently, grounding them both. "I don't want a life that doesn't include you, not at the edge of it, not behind closed doors, right in the middle." She looked into his eyes, searching. "And if that costs you your empire, then it was never mine to keep." A moment passed. Then she leaned forward, resting her forehead against his. No kiss, no dramatic music, just two people choosing to stay. "Okay," she whispered, and it was enough. The morning of the grand opening dawned with a softness in the air, as if New Orleans itself had paused to take a breath. The streets outside the new Ninth Ward Literacy and Mentorship Center were lined with folding chairs, sun hats, church fans, and the hum of expectation. It was nothing extravagant, no gold scissors, no branded backdrop, just people, Women and girls of every age, neighbors, mentors, the press standing back in the shadows, and the ones who had whispered their stories in safe rooms, now ready to speak them aloud. Inside, Celeste stood in the back hallway, her reflection framed in a narrow mirror, fixing the collar of her cream blouse. Her hands trembled, not from fear, but from reverence. This moment mattered. Behind her, Malcolm adjusted the knot in his tie. His jacket hung over one arm, the other reaching gently to touch her shoulder. "You ready?" She looked at him in the mirror. "I've never been readier." He smiled, eyes crinkling. They walked into the main hall together, not arm in arm, not for spectacle, just side by side. Celeste stepped onto the small stage, the hum of conversation settling into stillness. She looked out at the crowd, spotted Mrs. Eloise in the front row, Georgia standing in the back with her arms crossed but eyes soft, and a teenage girl she hadn't met yet gripping a journal to her chest. This was why she stayed, why she fought. She leaned into the microphone. "There's a lie we've been fed," she began, "that worth has to be earned through pain, or power, or perfect silence." She let the pause hang there. "I lived that lie for years. I shrank myself to make others comfortable, shaped my voice into something palatable, and I told myself I was lucky to be accepted." She looked down, then up again. "But there came a day when the world called me something I wasn't, and I believed it, until I saw the way another woman looked at me, not with pity, with recognition." Murmurs rippled. Someone near the back whispered, "That's right." "I stand here today," Celeste said, her voice growing steadier, "not because I am unscathed, but because I am unhidden." The room breathed with her. "This space isn't mine. It's ours. It belongs to every woman who's ever been told she was too much or not enough. It belongs to the quiet voices finding their first sentence. It belongs to those who don't want to be rescued, only heard." Applause rose like a wave, not frenzied, steady, rooted. Malcolm stood beside the stage, watching her. His eyes weren't on the cameras or the crowd or the donors whispering behind clipboards. They were on her, only her. Afterward, when the chairs were half folded and the lemonade was watered down, Celeste stepped outside to breathe. Malcolm joined her, slipping off his tie and leaning against the stone railing. "You changed the temperature in that room," he said. She gave a small laugh. "I just told the truth." He looked at her, really looked. "You're the bravest person I know. I'm just tired of hiding. I hope you never do again." She studied his face, then asked quietly, "Are you staying this time?" He didn't hesitate. "I am." She nodded, emotions welling in her throat. "Then I have something to ask." He raised a brow. "No contracts, no publicity, no flashbulbs," she said, stepping closer. "I want you to show up every day like this matters, like I matter, without needing to prove anything to the world." Malcolm stepped in until their foreheads nearly touched. "I've never needed the world's permission to love you, Celeste." Her breath caught. "I just needed to give myself mine." Tears welled in her eyes, not from pain, but from finally feeling seen, fully, quietly, without cost. They stood there in the soft light. Nothing loud between them. No grand gestures, no borrowed fairy tales. Just two people who had burned through old versions of themselves and found something lasting in the ash. A life, a partnership, a peace not rooted in silence, but in choice. Weeks passed. The center thrived. Girls showed up early and stayed late. Former mentees returned to teach. One day, Ray, a girl who once couldn't read aloud without shaking, stood before a group of 12-year-olds and said, "Your story starts the moment you stop apologizing for it." Celeste watched from the doorway, heart full. Later that night, she sat on the balcony of their new shared home in the Millionaire district. A modest place, nothing like Malcolm's old glass fortress. This one had chipped paint, mismatched tiles, and vines that crept up the railing like they knew they belonged there. Malcolm joined her with 2 mugs of tea, setting one down beside her. He didn't speak. He just slid a small velvet box across the table. Her brows lifted. "What's this?" "Not what you think," he said, smiling. She opened it. Inside wasn't a ring. It was a simple brass key. "To the building next door," he said. "I bought it last week. Thought it could be something. More. Another space. Workshops. Art programs." Celeste stared at the key, then at him. "I don't want to build this without you," he said. "Whatever this becomes." She reached across the table, took his hand. "You won't." And as the sounds of jazz drifted in from a block away, the city humming with the pulse of life, Celeste leaned back in her chair, key in hand, future wide open, not saved, not defined by scandal, but standing in something real, a life she'd chosen, and finally, one that chose her back.